Digital entrepreneurs, listen up. Welcome to the E-commerce Edge with Phil Dubois, where we explore the cutting edge of e-commerce strategies to help you scale your online business. In this episode, meet Greg Swanson, a true digital pioneer who has transformed revenue models for media giants, co-founded one of America's largest travel guidebook series, and spearheaded innovations over the past 25 years in digital advertising. Get ready for insights and inspiration. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, I'm Phil Dubois, CEO of AdAmplify and your host for the E-commerce Edge. Yes, this is our first podcast, but our goal is to be your go-to guide for mastering e-commerce growth. We're going to dive into all things e-commerce, from real-world success stories to expert strategies to help you boost revenue, attract more new customers, scale repeat purchases, and stay ahead in the ever-evolving digital landscape. For our very first episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Greg Swanson, an accomplished entrepreneur and digital revenue strategist. It was my great luck to start working with Greg in 1999 when we were engaged to assist him in rolling out digital advertising programs for a major U.S. newspaper chain. His pioneering work in online strategies for traditional media led into multi-channel marketing and revenue enhancement for pure-play online businesses. Today, we'll explore how Greg's experience can help you unlock new growth opportunities for your online store. So let's just jump into it right now. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Phil. Nice to be here.
As I mentioned in the intro, Greg, you've been involved in the transition from print to online media. I say transition, but I think it was really a tectonic shift in the marketing landscape, one that affected the way we measure and judge success, certainly. The online world has given us the ability like never before to measure the complexity of a user's journey leading to a purchase. Complex also in that traditional concept of a sales funnel no longer adequately describes, I don't think, a customer's journey in the B2C space. So I'm going to start by asking you two questions. The first, how do you describe the customer journey in a post-funnel world? And second, does this new multi-touch model affect how marketing budgets should be allocated?
These are excellent questions, and it's been a long time since the original concept of the marketing funnel was developed. It came out in 1898. Oh, hi. Elias St. Elmo Lewis, great name.
Oh, good old Elias, yeah.
I know, good old Elias St. Elmo. But he was trying to model something in the insurance industry where multiple companies had many different offerings, and you could buy various terms and all that stuff. And his model was pretty simple. A customer is faced with many choices. They think about them. They narrow them further. They decide whether or not they really want to buy insurance. They think about the whole product. And then finally, as the last step, they make a decision. So the model was many choices, fewer choices, fewer choices, and fewer choices leading to a purchase. Wouldn't it be wonderful if that was still true? Because the world we live in today, the customer doesn't move through a series of stages with reducing the total number of choices they look at. Instead, it's more like this incredible web. And the core of the difference has been that in the original model, most of the messages that the consumer was receiving were from brands, from the insurance companies. These are our products. These are our prices. These are the features you should think about. And the problem we have today is that consumers have been empowered in a completely different way to speak directly to our previous customers, to look at reviews, to look at various kinds of social proof, to look at third-party review sites. So it's no longer this linear stair step down to a decision. It's more like a complex web with multiple entry points, ongoing interactions, and influences both from the brand, but also third-party sources like reviews, social proof, and word of mouth. So from the first contact with the potential customer, the path goes, first they listen to brand messages. Let's say that it starts off with we are sending as a brand a constant awareness campaign to our most likely prospects. And that awareness campaign leads eventually to some sort of trigger where the customer says, I'm going to start considering this product. As soon as they do that, the process is no longer like the purchasing funnel. The consumer's doing their own research. And they're looking at all kinds of sites online. They're doing various research. They're looking at our products. They're looking at maybe our demonstration videos online. They're looking at all kinds of things. And in the modern day, they have much less brand loyalty. They no longer buy a Ford because their dad bought a Ford and their grandpa bought a Ford, and that's what they're going to buy is a Ford. Now, when they start looking for cars, they might say something as simple as SUV, and as soon as they start searching for SUVs, wow, the total number of cars they're looking at may expand, not contract. So they're keeping they keep their purchases options open until the very last minute. In fact, in retail, the research shows us that they change their mind while they're in a store, even after they've gone through this long process of research. So successful brands provide ongoing exposure to their most likely customers. When those customers begin to evaluate the product and they start looking for affirmation that they should buy from us, we as marketers have to make sure that we're also driving the process of reviews, that we're putting our customer reviews in places where they can be found, that we're finding ways to get third-party endorsements and other kinds of social proof. We have to be actively managing part of the evaluation phase, and the evaluation phase is no longer messages from the brand, but rather from previous customers and others. So we've got to manage all that. Brand messaging can still be sent across audio and video channels, social channels, search channels. We've got 1 million messages to send to the customer, but those aren't the only messages that count. The other messages are from previous customers, reviews, and dispassionate third-party sites. We're in a completely different world for content marketing, for instance, where third-party endorsements of a product can be more important than when the manufacturer or what the manufacturer retail says about themselves.
So we've got all of these channels to contend with, but as marketers, we all have our comfort zones. You've warned about marketers who fall into the trap of overusing the channels they're most familiar with, be that email or social, paid search, gathering reviews. Talk about this. Talk about how we deal with the comfort zones that we're all sitting in with expertise that, fits within those comfort zones. So if I'm a paid search guy, I'm going to tend to go towards paid search and maybe not think so much about.
It is astonishing when you think about just what's happened in the last 2 years. We have gone from cable TV, where you could buy ads from the cable network to target people watching cable TV, to almost everyone is on some form of, they have some access to some streaming TV. And streaming TV can now be addressable in all kinds of ways, contextually, behaviorally, based on purchases. In other words, every day that passes, whether the example I've just given in TV or social, it has led to the proliferation of marketing options. They've exploded. But all the channels, whether it's addressable streaming content, social media, organic and paid search, geofencing, targeted banners, audio channels, all of them, each one of them targets an audience in a slightly different way. They deliver a different level of engagement, and they're tracked differently. And in my experience in dealing with especially with companies, and even agencies, it's really hard to find marketers who are equally skilled at using all these tools. So what I have found is I will talk to some companies and I'll say, well, so what are you using to reach your customers? And they'll tell me, we found that HubSpot or some other product is really great for us. We really love email, or we really love geofencing, or we love Facebook, or we love Google, or we love, paid search, or we're trying to drive organic search. We really focus on SEM. In 100% of these cases, and I'm overstating that, but in many, many, many of these cases, the thing that led them to choose the marketing channel of choice was not some dispassionate testing of the options, but rather that happened to be the preference or the skill set of their marketing director. If you hire someone who really understands email, what are the chances that they're going to focus on television? Not very great. They're going to focus on email. So to get the best results, companies need to insist that their marketers not only stay in the silos that they understand well. The key is to understand the performance of every channel across multiple touch points that works for your business and product. And you need to find those by searching, by evaluating multiple channels. Because what we have found is, going back to the St. Elmo's tool, it's simply not true that we're on a linear path, or even, let's say in the strongest way, the idea that a company can run an ad and get a customer is a little crazy. In real life, it's 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 touch points that lead to a purchase. And you have to manage all of those touch points, not simply pray that the ad's going to convert.
So what I'm hearing is that, when we're narrowly focused on one channel or two channels, we're really, not only are we overlooking what the other channels are contributing, but we're also overlooking how the channels interact with one another and contribute to the user journey. And that's a huge miss, because now you've lost identifying each touch point's real value in the user journey, because they're not all equal.
I think you've said that perfectly. Marketers are too frequently measuring campaigns without a context. They can measure what they're doing, but they have no idea of what they're not measuring the tools they're not using. So, and oddly, this is sort of a strange thing, especially for small businesses. Competitors don't exchange information with each other about what works for their business. Successful marketing strategies are trade secrets. So how do you educate a marketing person who has a deep knowledge of one specific tool, but limited knowledge of the others, that they should think about them? You can hire experts in email, TV, radio. You can find specialists in Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. People understand organic search, paid search, but it's really hard to find someone who comfortably uses all of them and is measuring all of them and their various contributions. And if you have someone who's trained in one marketing tool, typically what's happened is they have found that they can defend their spending on that tool. In other words, every marketing person is primarily focused on convincing their management that they're not wasting money. So they're looking for tools that they understand and can interpret the results for well. They don't frequently advocate for tools that are outside their own skill set. And so the risk of that is really simple. They only know what, they don't know what they don't know. So here's what that means. Let me give you an example. If you really focus on your reports from Google, Google may report that 60% of your online sales came from Google search, organic search or paid search. That may very well be true. But if you look at the organic searches, what prompted those organic searches could be many things. It could be connections made with your company on touch points on many other platforms. Could be email, could be all kinds of things. And here's why this is important. When we look at the actual lifetime value of a customer, where they come from actually matters. I'll give you this example. Let's say that you had a business that sold a food item. Here in Portland, many of our restaurants list the vendors that if you're getting beef or lamb, they list where that item comes from, the farm or the ranch or the farmer and what those companies say is, wow, the consumer who was eating at their favorite restaurant and who saw an endorsement by their favorite chef of a particular source for lamb, if they do a Google search for that lamb, that organic Google search was driven by the fact that they didn't know the URL of the ranch site, but the search was driven by that menu that they read. And that customer who came to that ranch driven by an endorsement of their favorite chef, if you look at the lifetime value of those customers and you compare them to those who responded to a price-driven ad on paid Google search, you'll find that the one who came with a brand halo continues to be a customer for much longer, has a much better lifetime value to the customer than the one that you hit with just a paid Google ad. So one of the things, actually, since I'm talking to you, Phil, one of the things I love about AdAmplify, tools like yours, is it allows you to do exactly what I've just described. Look at every one of the touch points on the that led to the transaction. But even more importantly, look at how future transactions are related to the origin of that customer. How they came to make their first purchase is really important. And if you can track that over time, you can, and also tailor the messages you have post initial interaction, you can really have a huge impact on the long-term lifetime value of that customer. I think successful marketing strategies all require an understanding of how different touch points interact, contribute to the whole purchasing relationship between the consumer and the customer. And you have to have a way to measure not only the last touch conversions, but also all the influential touch points that led to that.
Well, let's talk a bit more about customer lifetime value. I mean, the obvious ways to improve ROI on your marketing spend are to win new customers and retain existing ones. Acquiring a new customer. Pardon?
Those would be the two, all right.
So, but acquiring a new customer costs more than keeping an existing customer. So how does that impact how you allocate marketing dollars and the channels to actually achieve both of those? Because the channel that's going to recruit a new customer is probably not going to be the channel that retains them and gets them re-engaged.
I think that's exactly right. And it's funny, you've just described the two goals of a company, and that is get new customers and keep them, which is right. The other thing is, I'll give you the opposite side, which are the two things that marketers and companies want to avoid. And that is antagonizing prospective or existing customers and wasting money, right? So the flip side of that is throwing money away and losing customers. And I see customers doing both because they mishandle the post-sales experience. They're much better at managing their brand and trying to attract a new customer than they are paying. They don't pay as much attention on what it takes to keep, to retain a customer after they've acquired them. And as we've just discussed, different buyers come to you with different expectations, different brand halos, different senses of your brand, different senses of loyalty, different senses of expectation, and they kind of have to be treated differently. And even if you've acquired them through social media or email, understanding the differences between how those people have come to you and what they expect from you and tailoring your marketing efforts accordingly is really crucial. It is, it's as stupidly simple as it's different strokes for different folks. Marketers who drill down on the initial channel a customer came from will be surprised by the variation in their purchasing behaviors. At least that's what we see everywhere. If you cross-reference where the customer was acquired with their purchase cadence, that is, how often have they purchased? If you look at their order history, how many orders have they placed? You can drill down and you can learn all kinds of things. I'll give you an example. We saw a client who saw amazing improvements in retention when they realized that if you have someone who has made multiple purchases, let's just use this example, 3 purchases in a year, and then they went 160 days and they had not made a purchase. So they had more than one purchase. They've had 3 purchases. They showed that they were interested. They liked the product. They were repeat customers, but they haven't bought in the last 160 days. If you immediately send a very warm message tailored to them, you can improve the churn rate substantially. But otherwise, this is a churning group. These people that hadn't bought in 160 days were likely to never come back. But you could rescue them, and you can actually set up a plan you can map out when the marks of when a cohort is likely to churn and target them specifically. But as you do, what you'll notice is where they came from does affect what the message should be like, because their expectation for your brand is different. You have some customers buying almost entirely on price. They're going to be driven entirely by price. You have other customers that are not driven by price, and price may not be the only way you get them back. You need to reinforce the elements of the brand that they found appealing in the first instance again. So the point about this is you have to approach them differently, micro-target them, and especially any group that's at high risk of churning.
Okay. So, that's a great description, because we're seeing the same thing. The paid search customer is very different. He's transactional. He's probably been searching for a good deal, whereas the customer who comes through social is looking for a different experience. And you're right, you can't treat them the same way, and you can't re-engage them in the in the same way. So, having an understanding there, I mean, how you keep them coming back is very crucial.
I had a crazy fun example, Phil, from my past. Hard as this is to believe, long ago, there was such a thing as a Beer of the Month club. And the concept was pretty simple. When microbreweries were starting to appear all across the country, they tended to only have regional distribution. They had not yet won the battle for finding shelf space nationally. And so what that meant is if you lived in the Northeast, you really didn't get to taste the beers of Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. And same thing for Oregon and Washington, you didn't get to taste the beers from the East. So they formed this club called Beer of the Month Club, and they would send subscribers to this club 6 or 12, I can't remember, 6 or 12 beers from microbreweries from all across the country. And I knew the people who started this company really well, very fun people. They really liked beer. They were passionate about beer, and they thought that all their customers would be passionate about beer. And when they ran ads, they targeted people who loved beer. And they came to me after they'd been in business about 6 or 7 months, and they said, we have this all wrong. We have now figured out we're completely mistaken about how our business works. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, we do send our 6-packs only to people who love beer, but it's not the people who love beer who buys it. It's the people who love beer. It's their spouses, or it's their business partners, or it's all kinds of people. But it was not so much the beer lover. It was people who said, he loves beer. This would be a great gift for him. And well, the challenge of that is how do you get, if all of your customers who are satisfied in receiving your product, if none of them are the people who bought the product, they're the recipient of it, but not the purchaser, who do you contact to renew? When you don't want to go back to the business partner or the spouse and say, or rather you can, but if they bought it, it's likely they bought it as a kind of a novelty. So what they found is nearly all of their customers were they would buy a subscription for a year and they didn't renew. They also found, though, that there were some magazines out there like All About Beer and Beer Magazine and others that targeted beer lovers, beer fanatics. And if they could get a subscription from off of All About Beer or Beer Magazine, that customer was buying it for themselves. And the passionate beer lover who bought a subscription for themselves renewed. So the campaign was, they had one campaign for beer lovers and one campaign for lovers of beer lovers. And the two campaigns were quite different. And I mention all this because there's another group that is just like the beer trade, and that is day spas. 60 to 70% of gift certificates sold at every day spa in the United States is sold to someone who's buying it as a gift. They're giving it to a friend, they're giving it to someone at work, they're giving it to all kinds of people, but they're not buying it for themselves. So spas have the same problem. How do you remarket to someone who wasn't the purchaser? And it's hard to remarket to someone who bought a gift for someone else because it's just it's a different kind of marketing. So the point about spas is they have to have different marketing messages for gift givers, different marketing messages for those who actually purchase. And so the question for every business owner is figuring out what kind of audiences you have and how you can target your messages for each one of those separate audiences, and spend most of your money trying to target those who are most likely to renew, to persist through time, and spend less money on those who are transient, sampling you, or unlikely to renew. And just to say this, there is a huge difference between those who discover you in paid search and those who discover you in organic search or through some other means. And in general, paid search customers are driven by, they have much less brand loyalty, they have no brand halo, they're frequently driven by price. And so it's a trickier, they're not always your best group, even while counterintuitively, it may look as though they're driving a lot of your initial purchases. It doesn't mean that they're driving your ROI. And again, this is one of the things that you need a tool like AdAmplify or something like it. You need to have a place that is tracking not what's happening on Google, not what's happening on Facebook, not what's happening on email or other kinds of social, but rather what's happening across all of them and what leads not only to the initial purchase, but also, of course we want to know what leads to the initial purchase, but we also want to know how many who after doing a transaction come back for another transaction or third transaction. AdAmplify's, strength is showing us the first purchase and the second purchase and the third purchase and the fourth purchase and all the touch points that came between the initial purchase and the fourth purchase and the site or the contact, the touch points that led to that initial purchase. And, all of that is incredibly important. I guess I'm just trying to emphasize with customers, they're not all the same. We have to target them differently. And our relationship with them can't end with a purchase. We're still wooing every customer to get them to come back. And every customer who buys a product is either going to have buyer's remorse or buyer's affirmation. And that's partly going to be based on information they continue to receive after a purchase. How many of us have, bought something and just a short time later read a review about it where they said, oh, that thing looks pretty, but it doesn't work. And made us think, wait, what did I buy? This is, this is the challenge for all of us. No customers are relying only on the brand messages crafted by our marketing departments. And we have to be attentive to that and market accordingly.
I agree. I mean, understanding those nuanced customer behaviors and the interplay of touch points is really absolutely essential for improving any business's marketing effectiveness and ultimately their ROI. So how do you see, you've got businesses that embrace this sort of multi-touch approach who recognize the importance of customer behavior and the complex paths, user journeys that move to a conversion. But what's the advice you have for people who are still stuck in the traditional funnel?
If we just think about how the old model worked and how the new model worked, it all starts with the same idea. We're all sending out, we're all trying to maintain ongoing brand exposure, sending out ads, marketing messages to our best prospects. We have to continue to do that just as we did in the old days. But in addition to that, we need to be evaluating these brand messages and see which of the channels that we are sending these messages through trigger an evaluation process that leads all the way finally to a purchase. Secondly, are we losing people after we've gotten this trigger event and they started looking at us? Are we losing a lot of customers because we're not properly recruiting people to give us positive reviews? We're not properly recruiting third-party sites to endorse us. We're not building social proof. We're not building relationships with people on social media pages. All those things matter. We should be putting equal energy into the brand exposure, into providing third-party endorsements, reviews, social proof, online word of mouth, etc., because that matters too. And then finally, the post-purchase is now just as important as the initial transaction, partly because, remember, what we're actually doing is that person we just sold a product to is about to write a review, and that review is going to have a huge impact on whether or not the next person buys. So what happens after the sale is critical because that person who bought from us is as important as our marketing department, or maybe as important as our marketing department in determining whether or not the next person buys. Customer loyalty is not a given. It's shaped by us and how well we engage our customers and reinforce positive purchase experiences. It can make all the difference in whether or not they review us favorably or don't. And all of that is important because the lifetime value is entirely about how much money they spend. We have the cost to acquire the customer, and acquisition costs for every category are skyrocketing. So if it costs us more to get a consumer, the only way to pay this back is, the way to improve ROI is to get them to buy multiple times after this. So understanding who the most valuable customers are and how to keep them coming back is the whole ballgame. And recognizing different motivations and behaviors depending on how someone found us, how all the steps that led to their initial purchase, and then how we talk to them afterwards will determine that these are the tools we use to drive ROI. And what you need, by the way, to have all that work are the tools, the analytic chops, the marketing department, that takes an objective view of what's working across all channels. There's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of self-serving noise out there. Google will go out of its way to tell you that 60 or 70% of everything you do came from a Google page. And while it might be true that much of our sales had at their last touch point a Google touch point, it doesn't mean that what got them to that point was a Google ad. It's just not true. So we need tools that don't just show us how our email converts, how many clicks we get on an ad, how many clicks we get from social media, but rather after that person comes and visits our site or looks at our e-commerce store or whatever they do, come in our shop, what happens next? Because it's all about creating lasting relationship that drives repeat business and maximizes lifetime value. But Phil, you've been doing this a long time too. That is what we're talking. I assume all this aligns with your own experience.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. Really a time right now where it's really hitting home with one of our customers, and they've struggled to acquire new customers, but they've struggled even more to bring those folks back and getting them buying again. And you mentioned skyrocketing customer acquisition costs. They've seen that in spades. A year ago, their customer acquisition cost was for paid search was about $40. It's like $115 now. Competition in their space has skyrocketed. Google's an auction, so what happens with scarcity is the price goes up. But these guys are also hammered on the other side because their product margins are pretty small. They're like 25%. Their average order value is great, $250, but at 25% margin, they're looking at $60, $65 drop into the bottom line for an acquisition that costs them $115. So, they've struggled, and, they finally understood that it was lifetime value that they really had to win this battle on. So getting those customers coming back 2 or 3 times would pay for the acquisition cost. They had to keep them coming back 4 or 5 times. So they've done a tremendous amount of work in the last few months. We've seen their churn rate fall by 10% in less than 6 months. And their subsequent purchases is in the 70-75% range of their total monthly revenue. So they've done an amazing job at focusing on getting those return folks to come back again, to come back not just a second time or a third time, but 4th and 5th time. They've got a whole cohort that has made 15 plus purchases. And that's the only way they're going to survive, because they can't survive on acquiring customers at $115 per pop when the margins aren't there to make that profitable.
Right, doesn't work.
Yeah, so very much top of mind, just because we've been so involved with this customer over the last 2 months and their agency in helping them put together a strategy that would see them have the opportunity to drive profitability up, and they've accomplished that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. They're making use of more channels now. They've certainly tended to look more at paid search. Their particular product is a great one for social, because there's an appeal there. It's sustainable food products. So yeah, anyway, go on and on about them, but we've probably just scratched the surface here, and we could talk about this for a long time, but maybe we can save that for a later day. We'd love to have you come back again and revisit with us and dig a little deeper into all of this.
That sounds great. Thanks, Phil. It was fun talking to you today.
Well, thanks. Great talking to you again, and it's been a great relationship over the last 25 years.
It has indeed been a great relationship over the 25 years, and it continues to be.
Yeah, it's again, as I said at the beginning, an amazing story. Somebody started with ink on their fingers is now the guru of online marketing.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much, Phil. We'll see you around the hood.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, great stuff. Bye now.